listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the College Football Week 4 betting odds preview for Thursday, September 19th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, folks, here we go talking college football, and what a great time of year. We kind of know what these teams are, but now the crazy, goofy things that happen in a regular college football season, swings in momentum, emotions, look-ahead spots, let-down spots, conference games, the angles are plentiful. And Brian Blessing in Las Vegas, as is our good pal Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. It's time to dive in. A very quick recap, Bruce, as we say hello, is last week, that Iowa State game, lots of emotion. You got a goofy special teams play that just takes Iowa State away from a chance to win the game. And speaking of special teams, how about Michigan State? You got a field goal. Life is good. They got a chance to get out of Dodge. Kid steps up, makes the kick. They got 12 guys on the field. The poor kid's got to go out and do it again, and he butchers it.
Amazing how special teams change the outcome of some of these games, Brian, and certainly no better examples there, especially the Michigan State with the 12 men. That doesn't figure to happen to a D'Antonio team too much. But that hurt Michigan State for sure, and Iowa can't get over how much and can't underline how big that win was for the Hawkeyes there. Quality foe on the road sets them up for a big run. They've got Big Ten play coming up here, and they're bringing some momentum into conference play.
But unlike the pros, and believe me, they fall prey to this as well. The kids, when something goofy like that happens, it can have a residual effect for the following week, if not weeks to come.
Yeah, to shake something like that off, you wonder. It was the Iowa State thing was so fluky, though, the way that happened with the way the ball bounced into the gunner. You wouldn't figure that to happen again. Michigan State, though, the way that thing went and the way that thing got kicked away for the Spartans, you wonder if they're going to bounce back. And we'll be talking about their game this week in a minute, and it doesn't get easier for them on this week on Saturday.
All right, let's go to Friday's games. We got three of them that we can get started with. Utah, USC. Looking at Utah, 4-point favorite. Total in the game is 52. Yeah, obviously USC, Bruce, injuries, big injuries, the story of their season. And this is a good Utah football team. But now we get into the teeth of conference play.
Yeah, it is. And you wonder here about what's going on at USC. Listen, they are telegraphing what's going on here with their coach and the whole athletic department. Worse than one of George Foreman's roundhouse rights at Ali at the Rumble in the Jungle. You know what's coming here. Helton's going to be gone. It's just they're taking it apart piece by piece. And they've moved Lynn Swan out, the AD. The plan is the way Nebraska did it a couple of years ago. They're going to move a new AD in and let him be the one to really make the hire on the new coach. I've rarely seen a coach be such a lame duck in college football without being officially notified as such. But Helton knows what's going on. And I have a feeling this is going to unravel on the season for SC. The freshman quarterback looked like a freshman for most of the game last week. BYU put some pressure on him, which Stanford didn't. And if BYU could do that, look what Utah can do this week with that NFL defensive front that Kyle Whittingham's got. This is big for Utah. Have not won in the Coliseum against SC, beating them in Salt Lake City consistently, but this is the one that really puts the Utes over the hump. We like it a lot, 31-17. That's actually a Gold Sheet key release this week.
All right, bud. Let's move on to the Florida International Louisiana Tech game with Louisiana Tech a touchdown favorite, 51.5. The bottom line is Florida International's offense has been flat out atrocious. Louisiana Tech seemed to get their act together against Bowling Green. The one thing is they started against Texas, lost 45-14, and then they were asleep at the switch the following week against Grambling. It's actually what I'm going to ask you here might play into something I was going to ask you about later, but I'll even say it right now. There's the Temple Buffalo game we're going to get to. And Buffalo played their heart out against Penn State, had the lead in the first half, and then the freshman kid made a mistake, and the game freight trained on them. Then they calmed down. But when you're playing a powerhouse team like that, when you're a smaller school, the big schools' depth, they just beat you up over the course of the entire game. And then the next week after playing Texas, Louisiana Tech could barely beat Grambling. Then they caught their breath and they beat Bowling Green 35-7. There's something about the smaller schools when they play the big school. I think they get beat to a pulp and they really struggle the following week. So now we're just trying to figure out, okay, start their season over almost. Let's see what we're dealing with Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, and that's true. What you go back on La Tech, there's been a trend. The pattern for Skip Holtz has been they've generally been a good underdog, especially out in the road. Now, it didn't work in the Texas game, but that's generally been their pattern. But they've had trouble covering numbers at home as a favorite. They're only 3-10 their last 13. So that gives you some hope if you're on the Florida International side. Now, they've had quarterback issues. Morgan, their quarterback, was out last week. He's had an ankle problem. I'm not sure if he's going to go Friday night or not. Wiggins, the redshirt freshman, is more of a dual threat than Morgan, who's more of a drop back passer. They think Wiggins can do the job now. They haven't covered a point spread yet, but they did get back in the win column last week. And I think Butch Davis's track record here, and some of these Conference USA trends have endured. And I think I don't look to take La Tech laying points at home, and I won't this week. I like them more on the road. 22-19 La Tech. Skip Holtz wins. I don't think he covers against Butch, either quarterback in there for FIU.
Sneaky good football game. Air Force and Boise State. We get the Broncos a touchdown favorite on the blue field. The total on the game is 55. Kind of a regional rivalry thing. I mean, they're relatively close proximity to one another. They're familiar with one another in this Mountain West contest, and both teams come in good form. And it's always tough to prepare for Air Force's offense.
Yeah, and boy, I think this could be a special Air Force team. We've seen Troy Calhoun do this before. We saw last week winning that game at Colorado in overtime, past that gut check, winning out on the road against a Pac-12 foe. Now, Boise, I'll tell you, Boise might wish to start games at halftime, outscoring their first three 41-0 after intermission. So they've really picked up the pace, and the defense has made great adjustments. But this had been a very difficult series for Boise until the last 2 years. Now, Air Force could have covered that game last year. Was really struggling 2 years ago. But before that, had covered 5 straight against Boise and had won 3 straight as an outright dog. Hammond, the Air Force quarterback, a big play threat. Clever, how clever Troy Calhoun is. He didn't throw. He threw the ball once in the opener against Colgate, lulling Colorado to sleep last week. And sure enough, they bring out the deep pass and they sneak a couple of long ones in there. And that was Hammond doing it. I think Boise is going to have trouble putting these guys away. 24-21 Boise score forecast. That's a vote for Air Force plus the points.
Then we move on to Saturday, and I know you wanted to talk about Clemson laying a balloon number 41.5 to Charlotte with a total of 61.
Yeah, you talk about spots that might not be great, and this is Clemson. The 2 big games against A&M and Syracuse, the games from last year that everybody thought they could lose, and those were sort of the focused games. And now you've got ACC play starting next week. This is a pulled pork sandwich of a spot here for Clemson, and they haven't covered their last 4 as chalk here at home in Death Valley against non-ACC teams. Charlotte ain't bad. Put up 52 points last week. They're scoring almost 50 per game with this new coach, Will Healy. Very dynamic young guy, and he turned around Austin Peay when he was there. Benny LeMay, their top running back, is an ACC caliber running back, and they're putting up a lot of points, and Lawrence has not been all that sharp on the Clemson side. They'll win. Are they going to cover 40-plus? I don't think so. 55-25 is our score forecast there.
Oh, Bruce, you just brought back one of the fun memories of the goofy things in your life that you remember and always mattered to you. And you took for granted. I grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and I haven't been back forever, but every time over the years you'd go back, it was like this was a must-do. And there's a little place, it was called the Half Circle. It's a little diner, and I'm telling you, Bruce, heaven on earth, the greatest pulled pork sandwich you've ever had in your life. Honest to God, I'm to die for. And it was one of those things, you had it at your beck and call whenever. And then when you leave town, you realize, oh my God, how great that was. And you'd go back and then you gorge yourself on stuff like that.
See, food references are good if I can work them into some of these write-ups.
You got my attention.
Yep.
All right, there you go. I think this is an interesting game. Central Florida and Pittsburgh. And Central Florida on the road laying an 11.5, and the total on the game is 60. I think both schools may have the same problem here, but I'm going to say it might be a bigger problem for UCF. And they had circled the wagons, and oh my God, we got a Power 5 schools finally going to come and play in our backyard. And they took care of business against Stanford, 45-27. They win the game. And, Stanford put some points up on them. Pittsburgh, and we had them last week, that's just a backyard brawl. But there was the final one, I guess, the 100th meeting with Penn State. So both teams in big games, kind of a weird letdown spot for both schools. But I think I'd take a look at the home dog here catching the points. But one of them or both of them could really have an adverse reaction to last week.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could see the case for Pitt, although that was an enormous game. I still say that was probably the biggest game on their schedule, even though that's the end of the season, the end of that rivalry for the time being against Penn State, which is very regrettable, I think, but whatever. And they put up a heck of a fight, and they just fell short. These guys played last year down in Orlando, where I was just at earlier this week. And UCF rolled up almost 600 yards in that game. That was a deceiving score last week. They took their foot off the pedal, and Stanford scored some late. It was 38-7 in the first half. And UCF started to take it easy in the second half. Listen, they have won 20 of this great run. 25 of their last 26 wins have been by more than a touchdown. And like I said, almost 600 yards. They rolled up 45-14 last year against Pitt down in Orlando. So I'm just not in the mood to buck these guys. Let's just keep riding them and see what happens. Pitt's offense has got some issues still, and I'm not sure the Pickett's quite there yet. And we're just going to ride UCF until they got 3 quarterbacks they can use at UCF. And I know a bunch of teams don't even have one. 38-20, we took UCF in this one.
Let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. When you talk about some of the wacky games we're talking about, let me just throw this one at you. Throw a little Hoyt Wilhelm knuckleball at you. Old Dominion is at Virginia, and Virginia's laying 4 touchdowns here, and the total on the game is 45.5-46. So they're not expecting Old Dominion to score a lot here. Bronco Mendenhall, this guy's known for his defense. But you know what? This is a big deal. It's a regional thing. It means a lot to Old Dominion. It means more to Old Dominion than it does to Virginia, but Virginia's got Notre Dame in the on-deck circle, Bruce. That's one of these things when you've got one of these, you got a big number, it's, late third quarter, beginning of the fourth, and Virginia's got the game in hand, and you got Notre Dame coming up, you're taking your starters out.
Well, you're right. And here's another one of these sandwich spots. Florida State game last week was big, and Virginia came back late in that game to pull that thing out. Thrilling win for Virginia at home. And you're right, Notre Dame's on deck. And so here comes ODU in. ODU has had a week off, by the way, after playing Virginia Tech, and got the cover at Blacksburg 2 weeks ago. The new quarterback, Smart, he's not making mistakes. He's playing smart. No turnovers for the Monarchs at Blacksburg 2 weeks ago. If they can maintain that and don't hurt themselves, I think they can stick within this number. 34-13 is our score forecast. You're very right, though. The look ahead means something, and coming off the Florida State game makes this a very tricky sandwich spot for Virginia to cover that sort of a number.
Well, we're making this a theme thing, and you throw the sandwich thing out because I was just going to say for a second, the pulled pork sandwich got me derailed. I wanted to real quick go back to that Air Force game because I wanted to follow up, and I had a brain cramp, and I forgot what I was going to ask you. You alluded to Boise State coming out of the game or coming out of the locker room at halftime as lunatics. So clearly they do a really good job of making adjustments. It's very early on, but I'll never get that out of my head, the Jameis Winston season at Florida State, when they were a disaster in the first half and then turned things around in the second half. It was like an ATM machine printing money. Fade Florida State in the first half, play on them in the second half, and it happened literally every week. So long-winded to get to the question, though, is Air Force a good play in the first half based on what you said?
Yes. I think so, and especially how clever Calhoun is. I wouldn't be surprised if Air Force leads this game at the break, like they did against Colorado last week. So, yeah, I think you can make a first-half case for Air Force pretty strong here, and that's been a pattern for Boise. Slower starts, and then they really turn it on in the second half. Yep.
If you're following along at home, sorry for confusing you, but it's funny that popped in my head, and I just went blank. I go, wait, I wanted to ask Bruce something. Honestly, that may be one of the better plays of the week. The more I'm thinking about this, because it's tough to prepare for that kind of offense, and they've already showed a penchant for starting slow. So you give Air Force the nod in the first half, but Boise State's clearly good at making adjustments. Then maybe they figure out and they see what Air Force is doing to them. That could be a thing. Air Force in the first half, Boise State in the second half. And you know what, Bruce? We have to approach things like that because it's where the industry's gone now, and the convenience of being able to click from the comfort of your own home. But you've got those kind of opportunities with halftime plays, but in-game wagering and the like. Yeah,
you're right, and I'll pick my food references carefully with you from now on.
Oh man,
that gets you going. But you're right. And, this is one, at least in these Friday games coming up, that halftime, first half for Air Force, I think might be one of the best plays you're going to get a halftime bet on Friday night for sure.
Oh, boy, I'm glad I had the Fritz and the light bulb went back on. Glad I asked. All right, Washington, BYU. Washington's laying 6.5 here. The total on the game is 52. BYU, kind of the cardiac kids, but they're getting it done.
Yeah, they are, and they're calling Zach Wilson, the quarterback, the Mormon Mizell. He's like a Johnny Football Provo version, at least on the field, and he's making plays. He's very exciting. We saw what happened against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. That was as breathtaking a finish of a game as you're going to get, and then they pull it out last week against USC as well. He can make things happen, and I'm not sure that Eason the other way from Washington's having that same sort of impact. Yeah, they did beat Hawaii pretty good last week, which figured after the loss that Washington had the week before. But Eason threw 3 picks in that game, so that's going to be a problem against a secondary that covers a bit more tight this week against BYU. Limited SC to only 10 second-half points. So the Cougs are also on a 15-6 spread run since late 2017, and their worst loss last year was in Seattle. Kalani Sitake still got this team is playing hard for him. They like him quite a bit, and he is on the hot seat there, but he might be pulling it out. 2 big wins in a row. We think maybe 3 straight. 24-23. We're going to take BYU to do it again on Saturday.
Bruce, I think this is a real intriguing game when we're talking about Auburn at Texas A&M. And I think the odds makers are onto something here. Texas A&M is laying 3.5, and the total on the game is 47.5. And again, we get back to the polls and the rankings. Basically, they're telling you this is a pick'em game. And with the 12th man at Texas A&M, you want to assign 3.5 for home field advantage, so be it. Basically, they're telling you it's a pick'em game. You got number 8 versus number 17. Auburn, the wild finish and beats Oregon, but now Texas A&M hangs within 14 and holds Clemson to 24. And we said the schedule Texas A&M is going to play, that they were going to have a say in who makes the playoffs and are they capable of an upset against a Bama, a Clemson, or a Georgia. But here comes Auburn walking into the teeth of this problem.
Well, here you go. And both these teams this year, the schedules both ways are really, really tough. And Auburn, pulled that thing out against Oregon in great fashion in the opener. And A&M had that tough go down at Clemson. They were never really in that game. They came in the number late. But it doesn't get any easier for A&M later in the year. You've still got Bama to come. You've still got to go to Georgia and to LSU to close the season. So Jimbo's he's got a chance to impact the rankings, but it's not going to help Texas A&M's chances. I think the key here, and maybe one reason this number seems a little bit lower than it should, they've played 7 times since A&M joined the SEC in 2012, and the home team is yet to cover a point spread. This has been a big visitor series. It's been Gus's best role. They are thrilled at Auburn, the progress of Bo Nix, the true freshman quarterback, completing 75%. I don't even think Gus thought he was going to be this good But this is one of these malls on specials, and I know Jimbo's covering a lot of numbers too. But we're going to stick with the series trends here and give Gus a shot. He's won here before. I think he can do it again. 27-25. Auburn in a mild upset at Kyle Field.
And then we go from a game like that to a game like this. But that's the beauty of sports betting. West Virginia at Kansas. And West Virginia's laying 4.5. The total on the game is 49.5. We knew this was going to be a transition year for West Virginia with Holgerson out of there. They lost a boatload to graduation. Kansas, Les Miles goes there. They probably are still on cloud nine, go on the road and beat Boston College. It's been forever since Kansas has been able to celebrate anything on the football field. And only because it's been so long since we could even consider this. I guess the question is, how big? It's hard to trust West Virginia, let me tell you. But how big a letdown spot is this for Kansas?
Well, it could be. And, that we didn't expect to see that one against BC last week. BC sure didn't expect it. I think what it speaks to, though, is how deep the Big 12 is this year. If Kansas isn't a pushover, there's not an easy game this whole conference season. So Texas, Oklahoma, and the rest, beware. There's some banana peels waiting out here. Having said that, I think what you said might be true. Kansas, unaccustomed to going out in the row where it had lost 48 straight against Power 5 foes, and to win thumpingly like that, I don't think it's going to happen, even if they're back at home. West Virginia, nice win itself last week against NC State. I think the Mounties just ran into a buzzsaw in that game at Missouri, catching the Tigers at the wrong time. You saw Kendall, the Oklahoma transfer quarterback, throw 3 touchdowns last week. It looks like he's picking up Neil Brown's offense, which isn't that much different than what Holgerson was running. I still think West Virginia's got a little class edge here. 34-23 Mountaineers. Watch these guys, too. And by the way, Neil Brown was winning 10-plus games every year down at Troy, so this guy knows how to coach, too. And but just it speaks to how tough the Big 12 is this year.
A couple of games that are interesting, but let's go to the Texas game with Oklahoma State. Longhorns 5.5 at home, total 73. Did they score yet?
Well, the scoreboard operator better not fall asleep here, because this could look like the LSU game a couple weeks ago. And Oklahoma State's putting up points left and right as well. And Sanders, the young quarterback, is really doing well for Gundy, and he has beaten Texas 4 in a row. And you wonder about the Texas secondary a bit, because what LSU was able to do 2 weeks ago was really pretty one-sided in that game. They've got to tighten up pass defense, and they're balanced at Oklahoma State too, not just Sanders, but Hubbard is running the ball like crazy. And like we said, Gundy's been winning these sorts of games against Texas. He's beaten them 4 in a row. 35-34, Texas, our score forecast. They're betting. They've been betting Oklahoma State this week, though. So the secret's out here that this is going to be a tough game. So we'll take the points with the Cowboys.
And then, Bruce, it's a marquee game, but the number is bizarre when you look at it. And that's number 7, Notre Dame, at number 3, Georgia. And Georgia's laying 14.5 points. And I know, coach say, last year's last year. But there's a little subplot to this game that maybe not a lot of people are paying attention to. But Georgia, it really stuck in their craw last year. They were a 2-loss team, but they played all the monsters to the wire. And when it got to the playoffs, Georgia really tried to make a case. They were one of the best 4 teams in the country and should have made the playoffs. And Notre Dame got pancaked by Clemson. And Georgia just was livid that they weren't one of the Final 4. They have not forgotten that, Bruce. I think they want to take this team and just take them to the woodshed and make sure that they seal the deal so that's not an issue at the end of this year.
Yeah, you're right. I know they made a big deal of it, but by me, I mean, it was actually a quarterfinal game they had with Alabama, and they lost. So, maybe they were one of the 4 best. I don't know. Then they went out and they lost the game to Texas in the bowl game. So they're
right.
It's got a little weak in there. I got a little issue here. Kirby Smart, in these big games, he seems to keep finding a way to lose. They did beat Oklahoma in that Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, and they caught a fire at the end of 2017. But I don't know. I mean, the best team they played thus far is Vanderbilt. Now, I know they're top quality here, but I'm not sure this is going to be a repeat of Notre Dame against Clemson. Clemson was better than Georgia last year, and they had that defense, which was better. and Notre Dame just couldn't do anything against them. I think Notre Dame might do something here with Ian Book and do enough to keep this thing interesting. Now, revenge for old-time domers. Remember the 81 Sugar Bowl when Herschel won. That was a national title game. And then 2 years ago, Jake Fromm's coming out party early in the season, Georgia won by 1 up at South Bend. I think 2 touchdowns, though, that's beyond the point where we give Notre Dame a look here. That puts us in the Notre Dame column. We'll see. We could be wrong here. 36-27 Georgia. They'll win. Ian Book is very clever here, and I think Notre Dame keeps it interesting. I'm just not sure Georgia has enough defense to make this thing a rout the way Clemson did in the playoff game last year.
The thing is, Notre Dame has no wiggle room, and what will be very intriguing to see, they're number 7 in the country. You say a 9-point win for Georgia. Yeah, even that, sometimes you say, hey, look, I mean, no disgrace in losing to Georgia. But you look at the teams, Michigan and Wisconsin, one of them's going to lose. But a 9-point loss, I think Notre Dame falls down below Penn State. They maybe go to the 14-15 range. If they get rolled here, Bruce, the drop-off could be Thelma and Louise for Notre Dame if they get rolled.
Yeah, you're right. One thing, though, the schedule is not breaking as well for Notre Dame as it did last year. They had a lot of those supposed tough games. You got teams to the right. Virginia Tech was struggling. Stanford was struggling. And they caught Florida State down, Syracuse without Dungy. SC was struggling. This year now, you got to go to Georgia. You got Virginia next week. You got to go to Michigan in a couple of weeks. The schedule is not going to work as good for Notre Dame this year.
Hey, I mean, that's a pretty good sample there. I think we can kind of start winding her down. But I know you wanted to talk about the Florida-Tennessee game, I believe, didn't you?
Yeah, and I think, Florida, the Felipe Franks injury has made a lot of news here. But I wonder if he sort of limited their upside. And, Trask, the backup, came in there and did very well last week. And I wonder if this is one of these things, maybe down road here, this might actually be a plus for Florida. A lot of people down there thought Franks had a ceiling, and we saw him, almost blow that game in the opener against Miami. I don't think this is going to be a negative for Florida down the road. No bicycling for Tennessee on the win against Chattanooga last week. I'm still down on Jeremy Pruitt, and this has generally been a Florida series for a couple decades, and I don't think it changes this week. 35-13 Gators, even with the backup quarterback on Saturday.
And just to follow up, and this is why I love doing this stuff, when we have the ability to talk to a guy like you and we hash this stuff out. I'll just give you a bizarre analogy and tell me if you think this is fair. What you just said about Franks, that you look at what in relation to the number, there's a change of quarterback and the drop off from this guy to that guy, it's worth 3 points to the side. I'll go to the NFL. And I watched the Giants' first 2 games, and I think you could have made a case that in either of those games, Jones could have come in. And Manning is a pylon, and the Cowboys and the Bills kind of just bum rushed him right up the middle, and he had nowhere to go. And I think they misused Barkley. All of a sudden, now I'm not saying that it means the Giants are going to win games, but the belief is, rookie quarterback coming in on the road, they're going to struggle. I think it's the other way around, Bruce, and I'm bringing it back to your Felipe Franks thing. I think Jones' mobility will allow him to get out of the pocket and make some occasional plays. He's a kid on the road. He may make mistakes. You get a short field for the Bucs. But it's like all of a sudden you go, the rookie comes in from the veteran. I think it means points. I'm not saying it means the Giants are going to win the game, but I think it opens up more facets to the offense just because the kid should be able to make plays with his feet. That I think there's points, even though it's an inexperienced guy that's playing.
Yeah, it changes the dynamics the other way, too. I'm sure, at least in the Giants-Tampa Bay case, Todd Bowles was figuring out ways to come after Eli this week. Now he's got to change that around a little bit. And Jones also gets rid of the ball real quick. In the Florida case, though, Franks had a tendency to make mistakes and disappeared in some games. And that's why a lot of people down there thought there was a ceiling on how far Florida could go with this guy. With Franks, and maybe, let's give the backup a chance and see what he can do. We've seen this before, like you said, Brian. Sometimes it works as a plus, and I think maybe in Florida's case it will.
All right, Bruce Marshall. He's a gold mine of information from the Gold Sheet. Always a treat to talk college football. Wishing you the very best of luck. Another slate of games coming up in college football. Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and/or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling, an approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.